Hey, Dr. John DeWitt here, and I'm excited to share some more information about the updated Brain Builders program that's going to be coming out. I am excited to announce that we are going to be working and partnering with Cambridge Brain Sciences again this time around. In the initial Brain Builders Masterclass, we did that and we got an initial assessment. What we're going to do this time is we're going to look into it to make sure we can get access to this, but we're going to get an initial assessment, and then we're also going to do a follow-up assessment to see your progress, and it's just going to be amazing. And we're using a lot of the same information that we used earlier, but we're also updating it with some of Dave Asprey's book. He has a Headstrong program. It's a 2-week program that involves different things like you need when to make decisions in your life during the day. Should it be in the morning? Should it be at nights? Different environmental toxins, how to get rid of those, foods to avoid, how to pay attention to your energy dips and know what not to eat and what to eat. For me personally, I anytime I crave sugar, I go and I have a beet juice from our Mother's Market here, which is really, really good, and that is good for detoxing the liver as well. Movement is really important. You can do just walking, you can do push-ups, you can do body weight squats, which is what I like to do. I actually do them in the shower. That way I am multitasking. I like to multitask. Trampoline or a rebounder is really great for the lymph flow, which is good for brain function. Light, that's what the glasses are all about, how to block blue light to help you be more rested at the end of the day so that your brain's not more tired than it needs to be at the end of the day. You need to get outside into natural light as much as you can. Different breathing patterns and techniques to help optimize your sleep. And a really interesting thing is cryotherapy that we've talked about a little bit, but with this, it is a really easy way. You don't have to jump into an ice bath or anything like that for 10 or 15 minutes. This is actually the last 30 seconds of your shower. Every shower, you're going to put the water as cold as it can go and have it spraying on your chest and on your face for 30 seconds. And it's amazing how quickly you adapt to that, because the first time I tried to do that, I could only do maybe 10, 15 seconds. And now I can do 30 seconds, no problem. And it actually helps train your brain to know what you can deal with in a weird kind of way. And Dave Asprey, his big focus is on the mitochondria itself. And with brain health, originally I started talking about brain health because of traumatic brain injuries, concussion, CTE, and football. After 12 years of professional football, I had a lot of head trauma. And during that, I found out that the research for traumatic brain injury, I found out that it's a physiological series and sequence of events that leads to a buildup of calcium inside the mitochondria itself. So then when Dave Asprey starts mentioning mitochondria and the connection between brain function and mitochondria, I was like, okay, there's a connection here that I need to explore. So we're going to have Cambridge Brain Sciences with us. We're going to be working with that. Dr. Dale Bredesen's work, we're going to be working with that. We're going to be talking about the Headstrong program and Dave Asprey's research. We're going to talk about the glasses, where you can get them, any supplements. I'm experimenting once again on myself to see what supplements help, what don't really work for me. I actually got a sample pack of 4 different types of nootropic brain stimulating supplements to see which one works best. I'm going to report back to you guys on that whenever I find out. But so I just wanted to kind of give you an update. I'm also going to follow this little clip here with my presentation on brain health at the office that I did recently. You can watch that. I'm posting this here in Facebook, and I'm going to do other social media so that you can leave comments and questions, and to find out exactly when the updated version is going to be released. There is a bit of a time crunch on the Cambridge Brain Sciences, their initial program to be able to go through, so I'm going to have to talk with them and see how we can work that out. But it's going to be really exciting. I'm excited to continue to upgrade this information to give people the best brains they can have, because optimizing your brain is ultimately going to optimize your entire life, and not going to have any of those senior moments when you're like, what? Why did I walk into this room? Or what what was I getting ready to do, or what is that, or who is that? I forgot who. You're going to start to really reduce those drastically in your life. So I'm excited. Stay tuned here. Like I said, just in a second, we're going to pull up the talk that I did earlier on brain health at the office, and then leave any comments you might have, suggestions that, if you have a particular condition that you're not sure that this might help or not, and I'll make sure I try to get back to you, or somebody from my team will get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being proactive with your health, and I'm excited to get this out there. Have a wonderful day. 65% of concussions are kids age 5 to 18. I was blown away by that. And also, if you have any sort of mild traumatic brain injury, which is what happens with concussions, you have a 3.7 times more likely to have a knee injury, specifically to tear your ACL. Not to mention multiple ankle injuries. Now, why would that be? We'll go into that in a minute, but I am just so glad to be able to share this information with you, because I've been there. I played 12 years of professional football. I played however many years of junior high, high school, college, and played in the SEC. So pretty intense competition there. And we always, back then, it was, you got to worry about your knees, you got to wear knee braces, things like that. But obviously today we know that we never took concussions seriously enough. And this class is for parents, kids, it can be for coaches, training staff, medical professionals. We're going to go over everything that people go through when you have a concussion, what the medical staff, training staff should do, what the coaches should do, what they should tell the parents. And underneath the video, or if you're watching on your phone, it'll just be once you're finished, you can download on the same page. The SCAT-2 test, that is an assessment tool approved by the CDC for the Heads Up program on assessing kids and teens for concussions. You can also get a PDF download for the King to Vic test, as well as the symptoms that parents need to have if their kids are concussed, or you could give it out before every season so everybody has it. They can put it on the fridge, because they need to know what to look out for, because as we'll talk about in a minute, concussions are an evolving injury. So it's not just, you hit your head, how do you feel? You feel okay, all right, great, get back in there. The days of doing that are over, and we're going to cover some seriously specific things that you need to look out for, because if they start happening, you need to get to the ER immediately. Okay? So, as I said, I'm Dr. John DeWitt. I played about 12 years of professional football. I played with the Houston Oilers. I played with they sent me over to NFL Europe for Scotland. We won the World League Championship back then. Then I played in the Canadian Football League in Montreal, even played in the XFL in San Francisco. But the point of all that is just to say that I have been through it. I have been in the trenches. I do know what it's like. And back when I played, I'm 46 right now, and I know there's a lot of guys older than me that had played, and concussions weren't even really talked about. It's like you get your bell rung, so to speak, you just kind of rub some dirt on it and get back in the game. You suck it up and just deal with it. And if you don't remember who you are for a couple days, well, that's just part of it, and everything will be fine. I mean, was kind of shocking. We were gladiators, and you just did what you had to do. Nowadays, thankfully, with the movie Concussion and the new research, the latest research out there, and the NFL really taking this seriously, and it's not just football, by the way. It's ice hockey, it's basketball, it's soccer, it's lacrosse. I'm going to put up here in a minute the top 10 sports that have ranked by their risk of concussion, and there's a lot of girl sports in there. There's a lot of sports I didn't even realize you could have concussions, and something else, even equestrian sports, jumping with a horse, or rodeos. Obviously, rodeos seem a little more dangerous, but if you're jumping, Christopher Reeves, he broke his neck jumping on a horse, so obviously it's dangerous. So these are all things we're going to cover today, and the reason why I'm doing it is because I feel like I have to get this message out there, because we are starting to take notice, but there are additional things that we can do. I mean, there's no helmet out there, there's no equipment out there that's going to make someone invincible to a concussion, because it's just the inertia. Once an object stays in motion or is in motion, it stays in motion. So if you just go like this, if you have a great huge helmet on and go like this real fast, you're going to have that brain sloshing around inside the skull, and you're going to get trauma. So what we're going to talk about first, can we agree that concussions are a part of all contact sports? Oh, and by the way, whenever I ask questions, there's a little chat box somewhere on the video down in the lower corner, right or left. You'll have to look and see. You can click on that, type in your question, and I'll answer it during the webinar if I can. If I don't get to your question, then I will answer it via email. Okay, so this way, this is how I can kind of keep this webinar going, because we show it on the top of the hour every hour, just to get the message out there. And I would really appreciate it if you share this with your friends, because we really do need to get the information out there to make sure everybody's on the same page, because the days of the medical doctors know all this stuff, and just whatever they say, we need to do it. Well, parents need to know a little more than that. Be like, okay, well then what do I need to look out for? So they can know. They don't have to obviously treat their kids or anything like that, but they need to know what the coaches are looking for, what the medical professionals are looking for. So that way everybody's on the same page, so it's consistent, and that's just going to help the kids stay safer and be healthier. And if they're trying to get a scholarship, then it's going to help keep their chances for getting a scholarship up there. And it's just one of those things where we just have to stay focused. So anyway, put your questions in the chat. I'll answer if I can. If not, I'll get to you via email. All right? So now, here's the tricky thing. As I said, I played 12 years football. I really don't think I had a concussion until I was 30 years old. Running down the field on a kickoff, thinking, okay, I've been playing this game for a while. They're probably expecting me to try to juke one way and go the other way. I'm going to juke one way, and I'm just going to run right over this guy. Well, as I said, I was 30 years old, so probably my juking was not quite as good as my juker's a little broken. And I juked one way, tried to run over the guy. Literally, the next thing I know, I'm looking up at the lights going, what happened? Totally been knocked unconscious. I don't know. I don't have any idea how long. I mean, the play was still going on, I guess, but I really don't have any idea what happened. So, here's my question to you, and you can put it in the chat box. Do you think that I reported that to my coach? Do I think I ran off the field and said, I just got knocked out, I need somebody to evaluate what's going on? Can we compare it to my baseline from the off season? What do you think? Okay. Answer. Right? Okay. Obviously, no. I didn't say anything. 45 to 61% of concussions are not reported. So all these statistics that we're basing things on are woefully underreported, because especially when you're playing professionally, you don't want to lose your job, and so you do not want to show weakness. You don't want to be in the training room. You don't want to be like, oh, I got my bell rung. I gotta take some time off until I get evaluated. Oh, and that whole thing I was talking about comparing it to my baseline check during the off season. We didn't do that back then. We just recently, since that movie came out a couple years ago, started doing baseline evaluations where, okay, you can take the SCAT-2 test and evaluate them during the off season, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It's just a series. Here's a version of it, and you can get a download of this underneath the video or on this page somewhere. It's a series of tests that evaluate a variety of different things. You can do that in the off season to give you a baseline, and then during the season, if someone does have a concussion, go through the test again and see if their scores differ. And that'll let you know that they are having some cognitive impairment, which means basically they're just not thinking clearly. An even easier test is the King-DeVick test, and that is based on time, and it's a lot faster, a lot less hoops to jump through, a lot fewer questions. So with that, and I also have a download of the images that they use for that. It's a series of numbers with a line at first for a baseline during the off season. They time you to see how fast you can read those numbers, and then that way, if you do have some sort of mild traumatic brain injury during a game, I mean, I say mild because it's not like your brain is coming out of your skull or anything, but any brain injury is going to be traumatic. But they have you come off to this, or we'll go over the 6 steps. There's a 6-step protocol that the CDC has approved. We'll talk about that in a second. But they're going to compare how long it takes you to read through those numbers, because at first it's really easy. You got a line between the numbers, so it kind of shows you, and they're kind of lined up. Then they take the line away, so it's harder to track, and then they start to get the numbers closer and closer together, and there's 3 different cards, and it gets to the one where, I mean, sometimes people start saying words instead of numbers, and the numbers are all out of whack, and the time is so much longer than it was in the off season when they did that test. So that's something that is super accurate, because you're comparing the athlete to themselves in the off season, so you can tell if there's any kind of cognitive impairment. That is so critical, because the days of different classifications of concussion are over. Now, that was going to be one of my trick questions, but I'm letting you slide this time, because it used to be mild, moderate to severe for concussions. Also used to think, well, if you got knocked out, that was a concussion. Well, yeah, that's true, but only about 5 to 8% of concussions ever actually involve loss of consciousness at all. So that's something you need to look out for, because it's not, if you don't get knocked out, then you don't have a concussion. I mean, there's a variety of other symptoms, and let me just go ahead and pull those symptoms up right now. You can have loss of consciousness for 30 seconds or more. You can have increased headaches, increased vomiting, slurred speech, confusion, unusual behavior, seizures, irritability, weakness or numbness and tingling in the arms or legs. You can have increased neck pain with tenderness, and you can have decreased range of motion in the neck. Now, obviously, if any of those things are happening right away after the injury, then that's something that needs to be addressed, and they need to be sent to the emergency room to be evaluated to make sure they don't have an intracranial bleed or something like that. But it is an evolving condition, an evolving injury, like I said, so that they say little Johnny's running down, got his bell rung, let's say. You go out there, you're on the field, you're like, how you doing, what happened, what day is it, how many fingers am I holding up, things like that. And he's like, oh no, and he's answering correctly. You're like, okay. Comes off to the sideline, he said maybe he has a little bit of a headache, nothing too crazy. And that's a key too. When you do the baseline, they have to be 0 symptoms for 24 hours before you do your baseline, because if somebody has a cold or sinus infection or something when they do the baseline, then it's going to feel like they have a headache, and that's going to affect their cognitive processing. So important to make sure no symptoms for 24 hours before they do the baseline evaluation. So anyway, back to little Johnny. Little Johnny comes off the sidelines, and they're keeping an eye on him, have him out of the game. Then all of a sudden, he starts acting kind of confused. He starts to slur his words, starts vomiting, and this can happen 24 to 48 hours after the original injury. So this is something that you need to make sure, coaches need to make sure they give to the parents, like I said, to know what they need to be looking out for. Used to be like, oh, well, if there might be a concussion, then don't let your kids sleep. Well, that's actually not necessarily a good thing, because they need their rest to be able to heal from the injury. And we're going to talk about later, it is an evolving injury, but the reason it's an evolving injury is because of all the metabolic and physiologic processes that change immediately after trauma to the brain. There's a huge spike in glucose consumption, glycolysis. So you're burning glucose for the energy so fast to help heal, because it's trying to heal the brain as fast as it can. But then all of a sudden there's what they call a substrate deficiency, where all the building blocks that you need to make that energy are no longer available. So then you switch from aerobic respiration, which is the Krebs cycle, which makes a whole bunch, 28 to 32 ATP, which is energy basically. It isn't triphosphate. That's what's broken down for energy. That's made in the mitochondria, the little organelles, but we're not going to get on the technical stuff. But it shifts from the aerobic to the anaerobic respiration, which only produces 2 to 4 ATP, so way less efficient, way less energy. So it's going to slow down the process. So you need your rest. They need their rest. But obviously, if they're sleeping a lot more or they can't sleep, those are other things you need to look out for, because that means that there's a problem going on. Okay? All right. So, and here's something else that I'd like to let the athletes out there know. Like I mentioned before, I got run over, knocked out, and I didn't say anything because I thought it made me tough. I didn't want to appear weak. It's not appearing weak, and it also isn't appearing weak for coaches. If your star player gets hit and gets his bell rung or her bell rung, comes out of the game, and you're not sure if she has a concussion, and she says she's fine, it's going to be really hard for you to say, okay, well, you're a superstar, get back in there, you're going to win it for us. It's hard to say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not willing to risk your health. We're going to keep you out, because literally, according to the CDC, the days of returning a player that could potentially be concussed back to the game the same day are over. There's a whole 5-step return to play protocol that they go through that can take days, weeks, or even months. And sometimes it's not even a possibility for them ever to return to play or to return to school in the same capacity. And they have a whole government program to help kids with disabilities. It's the 504C plan, I believe. And that actually helps them get back acclimated into school. But we'll talk about that in a little bit later. So, I know we've talked about a lot so far. I've kind of jumped in. We're about halfway into this. We're going to have some additional information later for the coaches and medical professionals. But here are some, hold on, let's see. Oh wait, the top 10 sports with the highest concussion rates. So this is in order. I'm going to pull this up on the screen. You've got football, ice hockey, girls soccer, boys lacrosse, and this is in order, girls lacrosse, boys soccer, boys wrestling, girls basketball, girls softball, and boys basketball. Now, as I said before, 65% of concussions are kids aged 5 to 18. Now, why do you think that would be? Because we think, oh, if you're young, you're going to be healthier, it's going to be great, you're going to be able to fight things off and stuff. Actually, the neuronal connections, the nerve connections inside the brain aren't fully yet developed in that age group, which makes them more susceptible to injury. And also, the neck musculature is not as strong, so you don't have the muscles to help protect yourself. And so you're going to have more of a whiplash type effect. And that's why a lot of people are assuming, or studies are researching, that might be the potential reason why there are a lot of girl sports, women's sports that have more concussions, because they're not as muscular in the neck region to help protect and stabilize the neck. I remember when I was playing football, I did everything I could to make sure my neck was as big and strong as I could get it. At one point, my neck was 22 inches around. Now it feels like it's about 4 inches around. But yeah, I always knew you had to keep the neck strong if you wanted to stay safe. All right, so now we're going to go into, and I'll pull this up behind me here. Now we're going to go into the 6-step protocol, according to the CDC, on how to do the exam, because this is important, like I said, because everybody needs to be on the same page. Would that be helpful? Go ahead and respond in the chat box. Is that going to be helpful if we go over these 6 steps? We excited for this? Let's get excited. Okay, good. So number 1 is the on-field exam. Now, we already talked about that a little bit. You want to make sure you check the airway, the breathing, circulation. You got to check, say, little Susie, for example, is running down the field in a lacrosse game, gets hit in the face with the ball, so we're evaluating her to make sure she doesn't have a concussion. Make sure she's breathing okay, the circulation, check her mental status, see if she has any neurologic deficits, decrease in deep tendon reflexes, things like that. Check her neck for any tenderness and sensitivity. Immobilize the neck, obviously, if it's unstable. That's step number 1, the on-field exam. Then on the sidelines, to get her off to the sidelines, you want to get a more detailed information. Okay, what exactly happened? Do you remember if you got hit from the side, from the back? Do you remember feeling anything? Do you hear any pop, any excruciating pain anywhere, things like that? You want to record the number and duration of the symptoms. And then you have the King-DeVick test and the SCAT-2 test to compare, hopefully nowadays, to compare what she's doing or how she's doing and responding now to what she did in the off season. Obviously, you're going to remove her from play. That's step number 3. Number 4, you want to document any injury. That's a given. They always say in the medical profession that if you don't document it, it didn't happen. So make sure you document the injury. Now, if she shows symptoms but is answering the question and is answering the questions incorrectly, if she has balance issues, we're talking about little Susie and the lacrosse injury, by the way, send her to the locker room, and then if those continue to get worse, she needs to go to the ER. Now, remember, if she's the star player, you're going to have to take her out anyway because their health is number 1. Now, if they were a little bit older and you yourself are the athlete, you have to know and just get real with yourself that, you know what, something's not right. I need to take myself out because, I need to talk to the trainer because I'm not focused. I can't see straight. I had another story. I was in practice once, and you have your face mask, and we were doing one-on-one drills, and I just happened to hit just lined up perfectly with the guy's face mask in front of me, and when it did that, it just jolted my head, and I went cross-eyed, and that had happened before, but normally you just shake your head and then the eyes go back. Well, this time I shook my head, and my eyes weren't going back, so I was still cross-eyed, and I'm like, wait, what's going on? So then I'm like hitting myself in the head, going, wait a minute, and it took a good minute to 2 minutes for my eyes to go back where I could see straight. Again, you think I told anybody? There were trainers right there. There were coaches right off the sidelines and trainers that saw what had happened and saw me over there shaking my head and stuff. Nope, nothing. I didn't tell anybody. They didn't ask me any questions, and I just kept on going. So it's scary, the things that happen. It's very important. And one of the reasons, I know I talked about how I played football and that's why I'm doing this, but one of the real reasons that sent me kind of over the edge and kind of was the final straw for me is, when I was a kid, my grandfather died of dementia and Alzheimer's. He was 72. And he used to scare me to death. And I feel bad saying that, but I was a little kid. I was probably 4 or 5 years old. And he was a bald guy, never spoke at all. Can't remember him ever saying any words. And his hands shook. And as a little kid, I kind of thought he smelled funny, and it was just sad. I didn't know what was wrong or what was going on. I just knew he had a lady dressed up like a nurse that followed him everywhere he went. And then finally, he ended up in the nursing home and got to a point where he didn't even know what a hairbrush was and how to use it. And it was really something that I didn't understand. And the scary thing is that my dad is starting to have some issues similar, kind of starting to forget some things, and it's scary for me because my dad played football in high school and he was a little bitty guy, and he stopped playing when he was a junior in high school. And I think about the number of additional hits to my head that I had in practice, in college, in games, in high school, in boys club, and professionally, so many impacts to my brain that it really scared me. And I'm like, I need to figure out a way to help slow down this process, and maybe even to add another layer of protection for people that are worried that they're going to have a potential concussion, because all these contact sports, as we agreed before, all contact sports have a risk of concussion. All right, so we're on number 4. We've documented the injury for little Susie. Now, this is where it's important because number 5 is you want to sit down with little Susie's parents or guardians. You want to give them, as I said, I've got the heads up handout underneath the SCAT2 test handout, symptoms actually, the symptoms to look out for. It's one of the buttons on this page. Click on that. You can download it, print it out, give it to her parents or her guardian, or as I said before, you can print it out. I personally, I actually helped coach my high school team right after I finished college for a season before I went back to the Oilers. So I really think personally it would be a good idea to print a copy of that out before the season ever starts and give it to the athletes and have them take it home and give to their parents so that they have that on their fridge so they know what to look out for, because it doesn't have to be in a game. It can be during training camp. It can be during practice. It can be during any time they're competing full contact. There can be a brain injury, and the parents need to know what to look out for, especially if the kids don't say anything about it, so they don't know. But if they start acting weird or something, or slurring their words, they'll know what to look for. They can go to the little thing on the fridge and be like, oh, wait, something's going on, and they can call the coach and find out, what had happened if they know. That is important. I would do that as a coach, give everybody that before the season, but also I would have extra copies of that you can send or hand directly to the parents right after the injury. Okay? You can email it, you can give them a hard copy, you can do both just to cover yourself, to make sure that you've done everything you can to make sure that those parents know what to look out for the next 24 to 48 hours. So that's step 5 of the heads up CDC approved protocol for concussions, is to let the parents and guardians know what to look out for, and if any of those symptoms show up, to send the kid to the ER, to take their kid to the ER to make sure everything's okay. And number 6 is my personal favorite. Anytime you have a negative experience, especially in a team atmosphere, you can use it as a learning experience. So use this, in this particular case, little Susie's incident, to reinforce your safety protocols, to talk about proper technique, making sure their equipment fits correctly, making sure that they know that it's okay for them to talk to you if you have any issues, or if they have any issues, any injuries. You're not going to think any less of them. No job is going to be lost just because somebody has a concussion, things like that. They need to be reassured of that constantly, because they always, as young kids and teens, they're always going to be thinking, oh, well, I don't know, he said that before, but now what about this? Just tell them, it's going to be all right. This is important. Your health comes first. That's the number one thing they need to know here, and just really own in their soul, is that their health comes first, and know that you care about them and their health. And it's not just about winning games. I know it's hard for me. It's hard for me to even hear myself say that, but it's so true. It's all about keeping the kids healthy and safe. And if you're the athlete, keeping yourself healthy and safe. Take care of yourself first, and then the winning and things like that, we'll worry about that later, because you don't want to have to worry about down the road early onset dementia, Alzheimer's, ALS, just all these things. You just don't want to worry about that. You don't want to have to worry about that. Now, here's the thing that I wanted to talk about as well. Now, these I'm going to pull up are the risk factors. So a lot of times people don't realize that there are, especially medical professionals, now they don't realize there's risk factors that can increase your risk of having concussion. So you need to look at that as a medical professional, or as a parent. Like I said, everybody needs to be on the same page so they know what to look for. So if your child has a concussion history, they've had multiple concussions, severity, if they've had severe concussions in the past, when was the last concussion, what was the mechanism of the prior concussions, what were the characterizations, what type of symptoms did they have, and also personal and family history, like do they have migraines? Migraines can make you more susceptible to concussions. Do they have depression, mood disorders, anxiety, learning disabilities, ADD, ADHD, any of these things? If they have any of those, that can be a problem because that can increase their risk of having a concussion. Oh, and as a medical professional, you need to know the monitoring of a concussion. So we're going to talk about the 5 steps for return to play, but also you need to know what to look out for and if you need to send them to a specialist. So you need to monitor you need to monitor their physical and cognitive activities. You need to consider their concussion history, like we just talked about, and you need to make sure that monitoring these is individualized just to that particular each individual athlete, and that's why we do the baseline evaluations. Now, you never return to play the same day, like I said before, and you never give them a date of return to play if they have had symptoms that are getting worse. They're going to the emergency room. You never come in there and reassure them and say, all right, you're going to be back in a week. Don't do that, because you don't have any idea when they're going to be back, and they will hang on every single word you say. And if you say a week and it's 3 weeks, they're going to be really upset. You need to give them hope and tell them, this is going to get better, but it's going to be up to them and how fast they can heal. But don't give them a specific date of return. Send them to a specialist if their symptoms have not gone away within 10 to 14 days, if the symptoms worsen, or if they have a history of multiple concussions or a lot of those risk factors that we just talked about. Okay? All right. Now, returning to school, obviously they're going to return to school before they return to play, and that is something that the CDC talks about as well. You need to have cognitive rest. So they need to avoid any mentally exerting activities. You don't want to do a lot of TV, cell phones, reading, video games, texting. To a certain extent, you don't want to cut them off from the world totally so they feel like they're just an outcast and they're grounded or in trouble or something for having a concussion. But give them a specific amount of time. Say, let their friends know they can text, or you can text, they can text back and forth, like a specific hour during the day or a couple hours a day, just so they're not there all day texting, because the blue light from their cell phone is bad for melatonin production. It actually blocks melatonin production. That's going to decrease their ability to sleep and to rest and heal. So it's important not to have them texting all day long, but you don't want them to feel cut off from the world and from their friends. So once they do return to school, you want to make sure that you look out for, and this is something else that the parents need to know, look out for concentration problems, if it's hard for them to remember new info, if it's longer for them to complete tasks that normally was pretty easy, if they're irritable, if they start getting worse grades compared to what they used to have, or actually if they have an increase in symptoms or have an increase in headaches, things like that. That's something you need to look out for, because then they may need to come back out of school for a little bit. And so now returning to sports, this is the 5-step process for that. Now the 504 plan, let me get back to that real quick. Now that's actually for students with disabilities, temporary or permanent, that affects their academic performance. And it's a government program to help get the kids that have these disabilities that aren't getting better, helps kind of make it easier for them to adapt and still get the learning and education they deserve. So that's the 504 plan. So now returning to sports. 5-step plan process, I should say. It does take days or weeks or even months. Step 1, obviously, like I said before, you got your baseline. You've got that compared to. So that's what you're going to use to keep testing to make sure they're okay, or when they're able to go back to sports. So step 1, you're going to start with light aerobic exercise. That includes stationary bike, walking, light jogging. There's no weightlifting, no jumping or hard running. You're going to do that for 5 to 10 minutes, only just 5 to 10 minutes, and the goal is to increase the heart rate. That's step 1. Step 2 is moderate exercise. And like I said, step 1 could go for a day, 2 days, a week, and then ease into step 2. Now, the way you would know if you need to go back a step is if you go to step 2 and say they start having headaches, increased symptoms, then they have to go back to step 1. That's kind of how you judge it. So step 2 is moderate exercise. And that's going to be moderate bike, jogging, running. You can do some moderate weights, nothing too crazy. And the goal for that is limited body and head movement. So not a whole lot of movement, just nice and easy. And that's going to be reduced from your typical routine as far as the time goes. If you normally practice 2 hours, go in there for 30 minutes during the moderate routine. Because step 1, remember, is 5 to 10 minutes. Step 3 is non-contact exercise. So running, regular weight routine, intense biking. You just don't want to have any contact. Non-contact, sports-specific drills are good. Running through the bags and things like that. Agility drills, that's okay, as long as there's no contact. The goal for that is to increase the intensity, but to avoid contact. And the time for that is pretty close to your typical routine. So if you do 2 hours of practice normally, then you're going an hour, hour and a half at this point. And then step 4, you can actually start practicing again. So the goal for that is to reintegrate them into full contact practice. The time for that is just a regular routine. So in my example, the 2 hour practice, you'd stay there for 2 hours. And then finally, step 5 is you return to play, full contact, return to competition. So that's step 5. Now, one of the keys to that is you need to reassure the athlete that if they come back too soon, that can actually hurt themselves and hurt the team. So you want to make sure they don't come back too soon. And also, you want to let them know that there's a risk of post-concussive syndrome. It's only 5 to 8% of people get post-concussive syndrome, and that's usually if they have a history of multiple concussions. And that can happen or last for several weeks to months after a traumatic brain injury. That is a much more serious condition that can lead to the chronic traumatic encephalopathy, the CTE, and all the other bad neurodegenerative conditions that we've talked about in the past. So now we're going to talk real quick. I know we've gone about 30 minutes here, so any questions so far? We're getting it. We're liking this. Okay, good. Now we're going to talk a little bit about planning. This is going to be more for coaches on kind of like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson says, everybody needs to know their role. So that's what we're going to talk about now. And then we're going to talk about some of the things that I discovered in my advanced sports nutrition training, as well as I'm getting certified to assess the kids and teens and concussions, different nutritional things that actually can help heal the brain. If you have had a concussion already, they'll help heal it faster. We talked about the metabolic changes earlier and the physiologic changes that happen right after concussion. We're going to talk about specific nutrients that you can take and that will help heal faster or protect and provide an additional layer of protection, almost like a helmet inside the helmet, to help keep you from getting as many symptoms or to have a concussion in the first place. So, prevention and preseason planning. Planning is so important because this is so important, especially if you're a coach and you're going on an away game. So you're not familiar with this particular area maybe where you're playing this game. One of your players gets concussed. What do? Where's the emergency room? Where's the hospital? I know they have ambulances there on site that'll take everybody, but you need to have everybody have a specific role. Like you need to know someone that knows exactly where all the players' kids, usually the parents sit in a similar area, but they need to know who the kids' parents are, go find them in the stands, bring them down, make sure they have the symptoms they need to look out for over the next 24 to 48 hours, how the transport of that child to the hospital is going to be to make sure they're okay, the different protocols and things like that. So all those things need to be laid out. So define your roles, number one. Who's going to be in charge of the field response? Who's going to do the field exam? Who's going to do the emergency assessment? Is that going to be on the sideline? Are you going to use the SCAT-2 test, the King-DeVick test? Who's going to do that? You need to make sure they are trained up on that and are well aware of who that's going to be. And you can even switch off, so it doesn't have to be the same person each time. So you have multiple people in case people miss games, things like that, to make sure that nobody misses the opportunity to make sure that the kids are all taken care of. Who's going to do the sideline evaluation? Who's going to decide about how the child feels. Are you going to use the King to Vic, the SCAT-2 test compared to the baseline? Who's going to determine if they're doing okay, they're not doing okay, based on, are they really slurring their words, are they just tired, things like that. Who's going to determine that? And like I said, number 2, you need to know the availability of the emergency medical services and trauma center, and have like practice runs, or have like on your Google Maps like how to get to those places. Even though I know there's going to be ambulances there, sometimes we're at high school games, but sometimes these are even younger kids at away games and they don't have an ambulance on site, because that costs money to have an ambulance on site waiting. So you need to know, as a parent and as a coach, where to take the kids. You need to make sure that in the preseason you talk with the coaches and the athletes, let them all know that concussion safety is very important to you. You're taking it seriously, and these are all the things that you're doing to make sure. You need to make sure all their equipment fits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You need to conduct the preseason baseline assessments. The King to Vic test is the simplest of those, but you can also do the SCAT-2 test. You want to look at individual symptoms, do a cognitive evaluation, and the balancing evaluation. They have 3 different stances for the balance evaluation, and that's covered on the SCAT-2 test, so you can print that out here in just a minute. Now, here are the heads-up 4-step action plan for coaches. You want to stay safe. Tell your kids to stay safe by following the rules, having good sportsmanship, no cheap shots, things like that. I had a horrible experience. Chucky Mullins played for Ole Miss, and I was a redshirt freshman. Happened to be watching the game when I was at Vanderbilt. We're at Ole Miss. Chucky Mullins spears one of our players in the back, which means he hit him in the back with his top of his helmet, broke his neck. So he hit the guy, but he broke his own neck and was a quadriplegic for years, and then tragically passed away because of a blood clot. So you have to practice good sportsmanship. No one's out there to really try to hurt anybody. So good sportsmanship is key. You want to make sure all your equipment fits properly, and you want to make sure you just use the right technique. Keep your head up when you're tackling. Don't hit them face to face, but off to the side on the shoulder. For equipment, like I said, it makes sure it fits properly, it's age appropriate, it's activity appropriate. You don't want to wear a football helmet for a lacrosse game. That would look weird regardless. You want to make sure it's well maintained and it's worn every practice, game, anytime you're going to be competing at any level with any contact. You have to wear those things. And that's important for equestrian events too, because a lot of times there's a lot of people that don't wear helmets like they should, and that's, you're not hurting anybody but yourself if you're not wearing a helmet. So, all right, before we go into the specific nutrients that can help optimize your brain and help to protect it from concussions, or at least the severity of a concussion, we're going to go into the metabolic and physiologic changes that happen immediately after a concussion and things you can do to avoid that. But this is the main reason why you need these nutritional changes. So immediately after a concussion, there's an imbalance in the energy, which is the ATP, which we talked about earlier. Imbalance in ATP produced and the ATP consumed, which causes vital changes in the concussed brain, which include glucose metabolism, which is also caused by a decreased cerebral blood flow. The blood flow can be decreased by up to 25% for up to 4 days after a concussion. So that's critical. It also breaks down and causes problems with the cellular machinery after you have a concussion. There's a shift to that anaerobic respiration, which is much less efficient in producing that ATP, which we talked about a little bit earlier. And we also discovered that concussions cause 2 changes in protein metabolism. The immediate changes are there's a secretion of neurotransmitters in the brain that can alter brain functionality and coordination, and the long-term changes in protein metabolism can lead to early onset Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and other neurodegenerative conditions. So initially, right after a concussion, your diet needs to be high in proteins because that helps to reduce the inflammation, but also it breaks down into amino acids, which are the building blocks for those neurotransmitters. So that's really important there. The imbalances in the protein homeostasis leads to an oxidative burden in the body, and energy demands shortly after concussion make it necessary to consume a higher calorie diet, the first week after concussion. So you need to eat more calories immediately after concussion. Now, hopefully it's not affecting your appetite, but it might. If you have a headache, you don't really feel like eating. But that's part of the reason that we're going to talk about some of these specific nutrients, because it's going to help give you additional sources of energy for your brain to heal faster, because 20%, like we said before, 20% of your body's entire energy is used by the brain. 2/3 of that is used for the communication between the neurons, but the other third of that 20% is used for cellular maintenance. So you really need to make sure you have enough ATP, enough energy, and we're going to show you a couple different sources to have more energy that doesn't have to come from glucose metabolism, because obviously, like we just talked about, there's a deficiency in the substrates or the glucose that you need to break down. There's a deficiency in that after that hypermetabolic process happens right after a concussion. So that's the bullet point summary of why you need these specific nutrients. Now let's go ahead and get to those nutrients. Now I want to talk about those specific nutrients, because with the caveat that no product, no supplement, just like no helmet, is going to make you invincible to concussions. But there are specific nutrients that can help heal the brain and protect it, so you have the least amount of injury from a particular concussion. So say, all right, the brain is about 75% water and can be up to 60% fat. So it's got these neuronal connections, the little neurotransmitters, which are acetylcholine is one of those major neurotransmitters that are going off to communicate one nerve cell to the other. And like I said, if metabolism goes into hyperdrive after a traumatic injury, brain injury, so it burns up all the energy, so then suddenly there's no energy for the brain to help heal itself. And they say that the brain uses 20% of the total energy consumption of the entire body. And 2/3 of that is for those neuronal connections and to the communication between the nerves. But the other third, the other 33%, actually is for cell maintenance. And so if there's no energy for that cell maintenance, then things aren't going to heal as fast as they should, because they don't have the right pieces or the right ingredients for the recipe to make more energy to heal faster. It's kind of like if you're baking a cake, you have all these different ingredients. You have the flour, you've got the eggs, you got the sugar. If you don't have the eggs or if you don't have the sugar, then the cake's not going to be right. It's not going to taste right. So you need to make sure you have all the ingredients, all the substrates is what they call it, to be able to do aerobic respiration, that Krebs cycle we talked about before, to get the maximum amount of ATP so that you can heal as quickly as possible. So now, branched chain amino acids are huge because they are used to make a lot of these neurotransmitters. So after a brain injury, you need to have the branched chain amino acids. We're talking leucine, isoleucine, valine. They are very, very important. You can just find them. BCAA is what they are called at the nutrition store or the supplement store. You also want to make sure you have plenty of protein as far as just eating protein right after you have the injury. This is the first week, the first 4 to 7 days after a concussion. You need to increase your protein to about 2.2 grams per pound of body weight. You really need to make sure you have that protein, because the protein breaks down into the amino acids, and that's going to help boost those neurotransmitters. And if you're doing the branched chain amino acids as a supplement as well, then you're going to be getting everything you need to have and give your body those particular building blocks to help heal faster. So now something else that you're going to want to have are the omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA. Now the EPA needs to be in a 2-to-1 ratio to the DHA, and that is something that is very important, and it decreases inflammation. And because the brain is 75% or 60% fat, because the brain is 60% fat, that helps the omega-3s, the DHA and the EPA, that actually helps solidify and strengthen those cell membranes that are trying to heal. So you really need to load up on those as well. And so I personally recommend 2,000 milligrams a day immediately after a concussion, and you can even go as high as 4 to 6 milligrams a day of the omega-3. And I also recommend specific nootropic herbs. Now, there's a lot of, I don't know if you saw Limitless with Bradley Cooper, the movie. They talked about the miracle pill that you could see everything and whatever. Your brain was 100%, you could see all this stuff. There actually are nootropic herbs that can help your brain function better. So obviously you need to have those as well. So we're talking ginkgo biloba, we're talking gatu kola, we're talking huperzine, and these are 3 of several different nootropic herbs that are essential to optimize your brain health. And something else you want to do is have L-glutamine. That's another amino acid. L-glutamine is very helpful in the healing process, as well as rosemary. Now, rosemary, this was all part of my research when I was looking into the nutritional things that you can do to help really strengthen your brain. Rosemary has been shown to help increase intelligence in kids. And so all these different ingredients that I'm talking about go along with my whole mission. My mission is to make sure that parents, coaches, medical professionals, we're doing everything we can to make sure that our kids, our teens, even ourselves, make sure that our professional athletes, our college athletes, high school athletes are as protected as they possibly can be from concussions, because there is no way to just say there's no concussion. You're not going to have a concussion unless you just don't compete. So what I've done is I'm in the process of coming out with a series of supplements called the brain, multiple different supplements in this line. There's going to be specific branched chain amino acids. There's going to be creatine monohydrate. That's another one that's really good for brain health. Zinc and magnesium, those are great for brain health at night. You can sleep, it helps boost the immune system and helps to heal the body. And here's the thing. Like I said, obviously I'm here to educate. I'm here to help as many people as I can to stay as healthy as they can as far as when it comes to contact sports, because I love contact sports. Sports are great character builders. They help people learn how to live life and compete with other people in a healthy way, always with good sportsmanship, of course. But when my grandfather died, I didn't really think a whole lot of it because I was so young. But now that my dad is showing symptoms of some cognitive degeneration and challenges, that scared me to death. And I need to get the message out here to you to make sure you share it with all of your friends and anyone you know that competes and does any of these different sports. I mean, I am scared to death. I don't want you to end up being somebody, or your child to be somebody that had potential, could have gone on and gotten a scholarship, but they had some brain trauma that they never fully addressed correctly. Because of that, it threw off the proprioception, the body's awareness of itself in space. So like I said earlier, they had an increased risk of blowing their knee, tearing their ACL, 3.7 times more chance of doing that. And because they didn't have every layer of protection they could to help heal their brain and keep it protected, that happens. They lose that opportunity for a scholarship, and they end up, maybe they don't even go to college now because of that. I don't want that to be you. I want you to know, I want everyone to know, to go to bed at night knowing they've done everything they absolutely possibly can to protect themselves from concussions. And for those that might be skeptical, saying, oh, well, supplements aren't going to stop a concussion. Well, as I said before, helmets don't stop concussions. Supplements aren't going to stop concussions. There's nothing is going to stop and make you invincible to concussions. These are just ways to add another layer of protection to make sure, and I've got the research to back it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of animal studies that they've done, especially with the omega-3s and things like that. And there are a lot of people that don't like animal studies. So I'm going to add the references here at the end of the video so you can look at those references if you care to, that show the direct connection between certain nutrients and brain health. So thank you so much for watching. Go play hard, play safe, God bless.
Go.
Hey family, hey listen man, you know they say looks are fleeting, right? All these muscles and all this stuff is going to fade away, hopefully not the beard. But as long as you have your mind, you can complete and accomplish anything, and that even means a long lasting healthy life. If you want to do that, man, I encourage you to get Dr. John DeWitt's natural supplement of Brain Med and Brain Med Omegas, man. This can help with the prevention, the function, and the recall and the energy of anything you're going through with your mind and with your brain. Y'all know I live out loud in front of you 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, live on the radio. I prepare through prayer. I don't write down anything. What I do is take Brain Med and Brain Med Omegas. If you're dealing with PTSD, if you play a full contact professional sport or college sport, high school or PAL league or anything like that, football in particular, man, make sure you're on Brain Meds and Brain Med Omegas. Natural supplement by Dr. John DeWitt. These are the best things since sliced bread, man. They will help you with your memory, help you with your recall, help you fight off Alzheimer, help you fight off concussion issues and stuff like that. Get Dr. John DeWitt's Brain Med and Brain Med Omegas. Tell them the Bearded Black Cowboy sent you. God bless y'all.